Hey everybody, this is Justin Quinn. This is my informative speech. This is my wife Crystal here in the audience. So we're going to look at the PowerPoint here. So slide one. My speech is about the addiction epidemic in America. And so first, just want to introduce a couple of things here. So on the whitehouse.gov, I found that 64,000 Americans died from drug overdose in 2016 alone. Most of us know someone who is or has struggled with addiction. There's also, like many of you, I have experienced the effects of addiction firsthand. We both have. The addiction epidemic in America is one of the worst public crises in history. But, as we both know, also there's still hope. And so, moving on to slide three, I just want to point out that the drug and alcohol abuse isn't a new problem. We can see from alcohol prohibition in the 1920s that alcohol abuse was happening. It was happening even in the early 20th century. But unfortunately, alcohol prohibition did nothing to stop the use of alcohol. What it did is actually just propel the market into the black market and caused one of the largest crime sprees in American history. And we see that moving into the 1970s when the war on drugs began. Mass incarceration for nonviolent drug charges started. Obviously, if we look at the numbers today versus the numbers in 1970, it has done nothing but fuel drug use. So the war on drugs is not working, and it has not worked. It's actually sort of exacerbated the problem. So the whole time, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin use, other illicit drug use has continued even to this day. And so moving on to slide four, the opioid epidemic is really where I'm going to focus down on this part of the speech. Drugabuse.gov pulled from CDC's Wonder site that drug overdose deaths rose from 16,849 in 1999 up to 70,237 in 2017. So obviously there's a huge increase in drug overdose deaths from 1999 to 2017. And also the CDC reported in that same year that an estimated 1.7 million people in the U.S. suffered from substance abuse disorders related to prescription pain relievers. We see there also that whitehouse.gov report. Moving on to slide five. Even though our system is not currently working, there are some countries who have employed systems that do work. In 1994, Switzerland enacted a new method dealing with the drug epidemic called the Four Pillars Policy. It took a different approach. They want to mitigate as much of the harm that's caused by open drug use, and they wanted to pull that in and offer safe use facilities where people can get their drug and even paraphernalia for free for an unlimited time frame. So there's not a stop date, and so they have seen a lot of success with that. Over the past 2 decades, the number of opioid-related deaths in Switzerland has decreased by 64%. And 75% of active users in Switzerland are in treatment on any given day, and about 95% have been in treatment at some point. So almost 100% of users in Switzerland have seen treatment. 2001 in Portugal, 2001 in Portugal enacted the so-called Portugal method. They decriminalized a 10-day supply of drugs, any and all drugs, for consumers only. Dealing in more than a 10-day supply is still illegal, punishable by law in a criminalized form. So dealers are still getting arrested and going to jail for that. Portugal now has the lowest drug-related death rate in Western Europe. Portugal was considered the heroin capital of Europe. At one point, the heroin epidemic there was terrible, and so they were in the same system that we are. They had criminalized Switzerland as well. They had both criminalized drugs and had a system of incarceration for drug use. they couldn't fight it, they couldn't beat it. It just continued to rise. So they employ some new unorthodox methods, and it's working. Drug use, the AIDS population has declined. Overall drug use in both countries has declined steadily every year versus increasing every year, and so it's working. And so also I just wanted to I just want to point out a couple of my personal experiences with substance abuse. I'm from a family with a history of substance abuse. My dad, from his teenage years until now, is still in active addiction with hard drugs. Two of my brothers are still in active addiction, as you know that. You were a regular drug user for some time, and I was a regular drug and alcohol user for almost a decade. But thank God we've been clean and sober for 3 years now, and also my wife and I are now the on-site managers here where we live. We live in a transitional housing ministry in Bolivar, Missouri called Exodus Ministries, where we work with women coming out of prison, oftentimes and most of the time. Were incarcerated for drug charges, and so we see firsthand the effects of criminalizing drugs, and we also see firsthand what love and the gospel do to change hearts. And so why should we care? Well, first off, most of us likely know someone who struggles with substance abuse, or some of us, some of you guys might struggle with it still. You and I struggled with it for years, and it isn't a problem for the poor. It isn't a problem for less educated or even necessarily weak-willed. It's a problem primarily based on sinful human nature. We think all people struggle with idolatry of some form. Our area of idolatry was in substance abuse and finding our purpose ultimately in a feeling or substance and things like that. And so as Christians, we're called primarily to call people out of that, to love Christ, and to not worship those idols in their hearts. And so, that's primarily sinful nature. Secondarily, it's based on a variety of factors and circumstances. Some people just grow up in it. Grandparents, parents were drug users, and they are drug users as well. And many drug users face serious trauma at a young age. So, love and support, those are going to be the big things that help people climb out, as you and I both know. Now I wanted to bring out a couple of biblical passages for you guys real quick. Romans 5:8, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I think that will pull both of us in. And so also I'm just going to skip down here. It says in John 13:34, Jesus said, "A new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another." And so in conclusion, the addiction epidemic in America is one of the worst public health crises in American history. Criminalization is doing nothing to stop it. It's just been increasing since 1970. This issue affects us all in some way. It's such a large thing, we all know about it. Countries like Portugal and Switzerland are on the right track, and we have a responsibility as Christians to help. So that's all I got. Thank you.